Hi there, Lindsay here. Today we are going to paint in oils and we're going to paint this iris. And this is a Sketchbook Sunday video, which means it is time-lapse. So you can kind of see it happening in fast time. I'm beginning by starting sketching with an oil pastel, and I'm using a reddish brown color, like a burnt sienna, just to get this flower sketched in on my canvas. This is a 5" by 7" canvas panel by Arteza, and I'll be using a variety of different oil paints today. I'm going to start off by taking some white paint. I have a little bit of Gamblin gel, no solvent gel on my brush to hopefully help speed drying a bit. And I am taking white with a smidgen of Ultramarine just to kind of get that very, very pale sky. And I knew that as I worked into the flower, it would pull some of that burnt sienna out from the sketch and it would gray the sky up a little bit more. So that's kind of what I was going for there. I wanted to get my background in first because that's how I prefer to paint. That way I don't have to try to paint my background around and risk messing up my focal point. But you can do it either way. It's however you prefer to work. This is just how I like to work in oils. Now this photo I took in my sister's garden, and we actually did a watercolor of this flower in real time on my YouTube channel, so you can check that out if you're interested. It was posted a couple months ago, and I really like this photograph, so I decided to do it in oils. Now I took that same brush I'd used for the sky, mixed up some purple with alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue, and just tapped in some spiky flowers to represent lupins. I got a little heavy-handed on the right hand side, so I'm just gonna wipe out some and throw in a little bit of that sky color back to give us a little more of an airy look. They do kind of look like purple Christmas trees right now, but it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Now I'm taking some Sap Green and I am filling in the rest of the background for the most part. I'm starting off with Sap Green on its own, but then I'll want to push that color back a bit, and to do that I like to cool it down, and since I know I'm using ultramarine blue as my blue, I can add ultramarine blue to the Sap Green to cool down that temperature and make a darker color that's going to recede and add a little depth into this piece. I only have 5" by 7" of real estate here, so I need to make every stroke count. And also I'm trying to keep my sketches to 45 minutes. This one was 1 hour and 20 minutes to paint. The one I did last night of the avocado, which you can see on my blog or YouTube or Instagram page, that one took like over 2 hours. I think it was two episodes of Orange is the New Black, however long that is. But I'm going to really try to stick to 45 minutes for these. I just got to get a few under my belt to get my bearings, I guess. Now to make the grasses in the foreground come forward and give us a little more depth, I'm going to add some yellow to the Sap Green. So by varying your color temperatures, you can make different parts of your painting advance or recede and give the viewer or give the painting the illusion of depth. I had to move my camera up a little bit because it had drifted on me a bit. I'm working at my bench where I like to sit and draw sometimes, and I'm just using this tiny little decorative easel to hold my canvas up. And I have my palette on a clipboard actually, so that you can see my mixes. I hope you find this helpful. Let me know in the comments below if it's helpful or if you don't care if you see my palette or not. I think sometimes it's helpful just to see the mixes. We're working with a real limited palette here, and I'll list those colors below. I did use put some burnt umber down. I didn't end up using it too much, honestly, and probably could have done without it, but yeah, it's pretty much a primary palette plus Sap Green and yellow ochre. Now I am base coating in the iris itself with yellow, and this is called French yellow from Charvin, but it's very similar to a cad yellow medium or a cad yellow hue. So if you're using a different brand, go ahead and use what you have. And what I'm doing is generally putting in the yellow in the centers, not touching the background, and then kind of pushing the paint to the edges so I don't dirty that yellow too much by getting into the green from the background. That I don't want to have a white halo. I'd rather have smudgy yuck where those colors meet rather than have a white halo, but I am trying to minimize how much mud I get where those colors meet. Now if you're doing this in acrylics, you could let that background dry, or gouache, you can let the background dry, or you could even let your oil painting dry and then come back in a couple days and do the flower. But I wanted these paintings to be alla prima, meaning done all at once, and that's why I am taking this approach to my painting. Please feel free to do this if you want to follow along in whatever medium you prefer. It's not all about you following me exactly, it's about doing what you need to do to help grow your skills. I will have a real-time version of this tutorial in the Critique Club. It'll be one of the November projects. It'll probably land in a day or two. So if you're a Critique Club member, make sure you check that out. And I'll have a link down below if you are interested in that. So what I'm doing here now is I am grabbing some of the Alizarin Crimson on its own and kind of a stiff round hog brush, and I am just dragging in that color. Because it's kind of a stiff, it's gonna kind of scrape away the paint underneath and kind of push it away and let me lay down the red at the same time. So I decided to start off with that because it would give me a little bit of the texture that I wanted, and it would also distribute the paint the way I wanted it to. If I went in with a softer brush, it either wouldn't move the paint around or it would just mix it up with what was underneath. If it was like a golden Taklon brush, if it was a sable, it just wouldn't have the oomph to push it. So that's why I'm going in with that. Now this brush here, I love these for oils and gouache. These are the Fusion paint brushes by Royal and Langnickel. They got a nice scraper on the back for scratching back into your paint as well for a sgraffito effect, and I might pronounce that wrong, I'm not sure, but it's just got the right heft to it to push oils or gouache around. And this is the little rounds. They have a set of 10 rounds for like $20 at any of your big box craft stores. I know AC Moore sells it. I'm not sure on the other ones, but AC Moore definitely carries it, and it's, you know, they go on sale too. I think I paid $10 for the set of 10 brushes, and I put half of them with my oils and half with my gouache because I like them a lot for both medias. Now I'm going in with some white and just kind of throwing in my secondary highlights, not the bright highlights, but just kind of where the petals are reflecting some of the light and just a little bit lighter. And they're going to mix in with the color I have underneath and just give me a softer sheen to the flower. I don't know if sheen's the right word, it's just going to give it that little bit of lighter glow that those parts of the petals have. And I'm also knocking back some of the areas where, like the underside of the petals, you don't see that crisp white, you don't see the crisp yellow and red veining. You see more of like a muted grayed down version of that. So I put the white there in that right hand side petal to approximate that. Now something I noticed as I was working and looking at my reference photo off, it's on my computer off to the side, I was noticing that I should have made this petal a little bit bigger, and it had a little bit of a curvy edge to it that I preferred. And I went ahead and kind of redrew that as I went, which, you know, oils are very forgiving. I mean, it can feel like you got a big greasy mess on your hands as you're working, but it's completely changeable. You can smush things around, you can lift things up, you can paint over things if you let it dry. It's just a really malleable medium. The softness of these Fusion brushes is really nice for the consistency of paint I have here. I have a combination of artist grade Charvin paints and some Georgian student oils, and I find that the artist grade paints are a little stiffer and need that gel or some sort of oil added to it to make it a little smoother to work with. But the student grade stuff, I really like the texture of the student grade paints a little bit better for the most part. And something I realized, because I'm trying to use up some old stash that I had from 15 plus years ago, student grade paints have held up better as far as storing. Like my Winton paints, my Georgian oils, those have all stayed really workable, where some of my Winsor & Newton oil, artist quality oils have stiffened up. And even these Charvins that are only a couple of years old have gotten a little stiff in their tubes. So there's a little bonus from student grade oils. I find that oils, you can get started with a really cheap set of oils and they're going to perform pretty well. The tinting strength might be a little weak in some colors if it's kind of like a no-name brand, but if you stick with any of your, you know, known brands of fine art suppliers, like their student ranges, they're generally wonderful. Now what I've done here is I wiped out some of the paint in between the petals because I know I wanted some of the background to show through, and then I went in and painted the Sap Green with a little bit of Ultramarine in there. I didn't want to do that at the beginning because I knew it would be difficult to paint around and I would just be making a muddy mess, so I saved that to the end. And that's what I mean about the oils being malleable, being able to wipe out a section and then go back in and add the color you need to. Now I'm using a small round brush and some white paint to dab on the texture on the beards of the iris. It's really hard to see them even in the reference photo, but I really wanted to make sure they stood out because that's kind of one of the prominent features of an iris. So by getting those highlights in there, it just helps. And plus having a little physical texture on the canvas, a little impasto type look helps sell that, because then you can actually get a little light and shadow from the actual lights hitting the surface of your canvas, because typically you're not framing a oil painting under glass, so any variation on the surface, like built up paint or anything, is going to catch the light and show that texture. Now I'm painting this little bud here, and basically when you have an iris bud, it's the petals are wrapped around the center, and so you see these edges kind of overlapping one another, and so I'm just kind of getting the edges of the flower, which have more of the reds, and then dragging it into the yellow ochre and sap green colors. Just and they're also muted, so it's okay if they get a little muddy when you're painting them, because you want that look of there's no light in there, everything's overlapping each other, and the petals are translucent, so you're seeing all those colors. Now I did struggle a bit with the kind of the hip of the iris, kind of the bud area where it comes from, and I did end up kind of painting it over a few different times because I couldn't get the contrast between the background and the flower stem, and I was just kind of getting frustrated because I wanted it to be lighter because I was seeing this kind of like very light leafy sheath over it, but it just kept getting muddy. I wasn't getting the right color, and I just kind of had to go back and forth until I managed to get something that I liked. And obviously if you're getting frustrated and you just feel like you're in a big vat of grease here, trying to paint and everything's just too slick and hard to deal with, you can always let it dry a couple days and go back. Even like the next day, the paint will have set up a little bit that it will grab some new paint. So you can always do that. Don't feel like you have to finish it all at once. You can work in layers. Most of the beautiful Renaissance painters, they did layer and layer and layer, and that's how they got that gorgeous realism. This is more of an impressionistic technique where it's painted all in one go like the Impressionists did. And you can do whatever suits you. There's no rules here. Now what I'm doing is going back in with some of that light yellow, the yellow plus white, and kind of bringing back the yellows in between the kind of big red patches or reddish maroon patches on the flowers. And this is one of those spots where I wish I just did it and left it like a few seconds ago where the way it was, because I just was getting frustrated because the center vein on that flower in the reference photo is not smack dab in the middle. It's a little asymmetrical, and that was really bothering me because I paint it symmetrically. I'm like, that doesn't look right. Then I'd do it asymmetrically, and that didn't look right. So I was just I probably should have let it be and taken a break and come back to it, but I didn't. I pressed on, and I didn't trust my first instincts, and I ended up going back and messing with it too much. So trust your instincts. Now I'm going in with the kind of high highlights where I really want to catch edges, bring the focal point into the flower by adding these crisp white highlights. Your eyes are drawn into areas where there is a sharp contrast, where there is things coming into focus, and so I wanted to highlight certain areas of the flower with these bright white highlights. And also I wanted to hit edges of the grasses in front, or the leaves of the irises in front that are kind of like coming out from the bottom of the canvas. So I also kind of outline's the wrong word, because outlining can look very cartoony, but I kind of caught some of the edges of those leaves in the front coming off from the bottom of the canvas. I hope that makes sense. Because you do need that crispness of your objects that are in that in focus depth of field range, that kind of plane of vision, and then you want the other stuff to be kind of fuzzy behind it so that you get that depth. Even though it is like a picture of a flower, it's not a landscape, it's nice to have that depth there and that contrast to make it a little more interesting, because you're definitely in a limited amount of space here. So you want to kind of pull out the stops where you can to make a better design, basically. And there I'm messing around with the front of that flower again. I wish I didn't. I wish I wish there was an undo button. And that's what I said in the real-time version of this video. I'm like, I wish there was an undo button. I would hit it 5 times and then I would have just backed off. But we have no undo button in traditional art media. We can wipe it away with a rag. We can paint over it. We can keep fussing with it until we're happy with it, which is what I ended up doing. And it actually turned the canvas to me a couple times because I was painting off at an angle, which could have been why I was having such a difficult time with that center vein on that front petal, because the canvas is positioned at about a 45-degree angle away from me, and did skew things. But all in all, in the end, I'm pretty happy with it. I'll share a final photo of this tomorrow on Instagram because I want to let the shine go down on it like overnight before I take a photo of it. So if you're curious, you can check that out. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Happy crafting.